Hey now, everyone. How you doing? This is Rob here from Rob's School of Music. As always, every Wednesday, we get to talk to some of the coolest musicians you're ever going to meet, and today is no different. We are joined by Mr. Rod Castro. Hello, sir.
What's up? I was digging that wait countdown music.
You like that? That StreamYard gives me that. I would love to, make it something maybe cooler, like images, but I've yet to figure out how to change it. I've learned to love it. All right, dude. So we are a music school, and I got turned on to you from Clubhouse, and my God, your resume is that of legend. So we're going to pick apart your whole story.
All right.
One of the first questions I always like to ask is, I guess, before we go into the details of your experience, between the massive gigs that you've done and the session work, I'd imagine anxiety, nerves, those are factors in all of that. And for us, with our students, we put them in bands, we get them performing and stuff. And it's new for them pre-COVID, obviously, but they're in the beginning of their careers as musicians, their journey. So they get scared and they get nervous. And I'm just always curious to ask people who are in such high pressure situations, how do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Oh man, that's definitely real. I still deal with that on a daily basis on things that I do. I will preface this that if you hear a baby yelling in the background, that's my 3-month-old son in my room and my fiance trying to keep him quiet. I'm home right now, so I'm not in my studio. But man, I mean, that definitely happens a lot. And it really has to do with my comfort level of where I'm working and who I'm working with and stuff like that. I don't know if I have the best way to deal with it, honestly, or advice on that. But I definitely am the kind of person that, regardless of the amount of anxiety or stress that I'm feeling about something, I just do it and I just go forward with it. I do my best. I think it's so important in moments like that to not show the anxiety or the stress. And it's not even a matter of not looking professional, but to me, it's more sounding professional. Like your performance and the way you play is so affected by your mental state. Like if I go into a session and I'm super stressed out about something, or if I just have something else that I'm dealing with that day, it affects my playing. Like I leave that session feeling like I didn't do a good job. And, I think a lot of times people can hear how you're feeling through the way you play. Like it's it might sound dumb, but it's so true. Like, I think the biggest thing with that for me is, like, no matter what, exude confidence in my playing. So whatever I'm playing, whatever I'm doing, make sure I sound and come off as confident, because that, I think, is the most important thing once you've already sort of gotten your skill set to a point where you can be happy with it and other people are happy with it. Like, I know so many people who play really, really well, who are incredible players, and they get into a certain situation or they get into a room with someone and they're either recording or playing live and they psych themselves out, and you can hear it in their performance that they're nervous, that they're not confident. And I think that's the biggest thing to work on once you're at a playing level that you're happy with. Work on yourself, work on your mind, work on all of that, because that's equally important to your skill set. Your skill set means nothing if you can't be your 100% self playing wise anywhere out, like nowhere outside of your room with yourself, So I definitely have had sessions recently where I walked in and I felt out of my element. The music felt out of my comfort zone. And I think I've been doing this long enough now where I kind of can not go on autopilot, but my hands know what to do, even if my mind's somewhere else. But like, I've had sessions where I've come out and I'm like, man, I totally sounded like crap. I'm not looking forward to seeing that when it comes out on TV or this. And I listen to it and I'm like, oh, that sounded fine. It sounds great. But in my head, I wasn't in like a comfortable, confident place. So I walked away not feeling fulfilled and satisfied from it, but it ended up sounding fine. So because I think regardless of how I felt, I was putting the confidence into my playing, even though it wasn't in my head, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. I mean, one of the things that we try and teach all the students here is, music can be a lot of things for a lot of people, and it can certainly help you through a lot of situations. For me personally, and this is something I project onto my students, is it gave me a lot of confidence, because in real life, I can be shy and I can be a little socially awkward. But if you were to meet me at a gig or see me perform, or even as a teacher, I'm outgoing and I'm a loudmouth, and it started as this sort of suit of armor of projecting this confidence, and eventually my playing and personality sort of caught up to it. But I completely understand, we get in our own head and we can sort of psych ourselves out, and just being confident in what you're doing is definitely probably
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's something that everyone deals with. And if they tell you otherwise, I think they're probably lying, you know, but it's so important. Like, I think that there's a fine line, especially in music, between confidence and cockiness.
Yeah.
So it's so important to never come off as cocky, like,
Yes.
in my opinion.
I completely agree. And I want to pick apart that later on when we get into the whole session scene. But let's start at the beginning. So was there something, you know, as a kid or whenever you started getting into music, where you maybe heard a record or you went to a show and you're like, that's what I want to do?
There's definitely 3 things that made me want to play guitar. I started playing when I was 12. You know, one of them will totally make you laugh, but it's true. That movie Desperado, that intro where like Antonio Banderas is like picking. I remember at one point when I got good enough, I went and learned that whole thing because I was like, oh, I just made my 12-year-old self so proud. So I've always been really attracted to Latin, Spanish classical style guitar playing. I'm nowhere near that level of playing where the professionals are, but I can fake it well. But that was one of the things that inspired me. The band No Doubt, that record Tragic Kingdom, Tom Dumont is one of my, I really consider him like my main guitar hero, you know, and I tell him that all the time. I got the chance to meet him a few years back and was just one of those, like, out of everyone I've met, I am the most nervous to be around you right now. Wow. Like, and he's one of them. And, you know, I'm an 80s kid, so I grew up on 90s rock.
Me as well.
The first like guitar solo I ever heard that I was just like, I want to do that was actually a Natalie Merchant song called Carnival. I don't know if you're familiar with the song, but there's a very bluesy, soulful solo in that song that was the first time I think I had heard a guitar part that like just put me in my feelings, you know, that I felt something. And I was just like, I don't know what it is about that, but I'm so connected to it and I want to do that. And so I think I was raised by a single mom and I bugged my mom so much for a guitar. And she's like, oh, you always want to do something. And then I spend money on it. And then you do it for a couple months and then you just throw it away. And I think she talked my dad into buying me a guitar, and he got me like, you know, this crappy $40 guitar from like, I remember back in the days, like you would just buy things on catalogs. Like there was no going into a store. Like you just said. So he bought me this crappy guitar from a catalog and I played that thing into the ground. Like I'd never stopped playing it. It started falling apart on me. So they got me like maybe a crappy $60 guitar next. And they saw that I took it seriously. And I think by that, like around 12, 13 was just like, this is what I want to do. And that's what I did.
That's incredible. I always, you know, I think it's so fascinating to see where people come from and what was the trigger, you know, because as a teacher, I get to watch every week of my life, someone hear Metallica the first time, hear, you know, Steely Dan the first time, whatever it is, their thing, like just watch their life change from it. Ironically enough, for me, my first show ever was No Doubt on that Tragic Kingdom tour.
Oh, nice.
I'm born in 1983. So this was.
Oh, same year, man. It was the same age.
Exactly. There you go. So I imagine we have a very similar experience with the music that, you know, all the 90s stuff. But that was the first I'd ever seen a show. They played at our local community college, and people were moshing to Don't Speak. They actually stopped doing shows afterwards at that venue. But I was like, this is the thing, man. This is what I want to do. So I get it completely.
Yeah. And funny enough, so I ended up like a while back, I want to say maybe 10 years ago, or a little less, I became really good friends with Stephen Bradley, the trumpet player for No Doubt. And I was working on music with him, and they invited me to a No Doubt rehearsal about maybe 4 years ago. And it was like, first of all, they rehearsed at the Forum. Like, who rehearses at the Forum? You know? So they were getting ready to do some dates, and they wanted to kind of get their feet wet because they hadn't played in a long time. And this was after the last record. So this is well into, like, you know, to me, past their like peak of like the ska punk world. And I was in like the VIP area with Steve, and I saw Tom walk in, and I was like, yo, Steve, I hate to be that guy, but can you please just introduce me to him? And like, I'd been friends with Steve for a while before I told him how much of an impact that music had on me. And I think we were out drinking one night after a gig, and I was like, yo, man, I really just got to let you know, man, you changed my life, and kind of like laughed about it. And so he introduced me to Tom, and I was like, please don't say anything stupid, because he always likes to mess with me. And so he introduces me to Tom. He's like, Tom, this is my buddy Rod. He's a great guitar player. We work a lot. I just wanted you to meet him. He's your biggest fan. And he just walked away. And I was like, God, I hate you for doing that. And so we chatted for a bit, and he like, you know, he asked me what I did, and I told him. And at this point, my career wasn't where it is now. Like, I was doing a couple cool things, but nothing crazy. And he was just like, yo, man, I really want to get into session work. I don't do that. I just do this. He's like, can I get your number? I'd love to pick your brain sometime. And my head was just like,
whoa.
Like, the dude who inspired me to play guitar is wanting to like pick my brain about what I do, you know? So, and he's just the nicest, sweetest guy. And now I don't even think he plays guitar anymore, because No Doubt's like done. He just like takes photos, and he's a family dude. So,
wow.
But I, you know, chat with him every now and then, and he's the nicest dude. And that's, you know, to me, one of the biggest full circle moments of being a guitarist, for sure.
Dude, that's a full circle moment few people get. So that's actually incredible.
Yeah.
Trying to think the order in which I want to do this, because there's so much cool stuff that's happened at this chapter of your life, and I'm just trying to build up to it.
Yeah, sorry, my train of thought gets derailed, so it'll go in different ways.
I'm completely happy if you tell a story for the next 50 minutes. I'm all good. This is your show. So this is a question built into a triggering, hopefully, for stories. We, as a music school, with our guitar students, we run into brick walls often when it comes to trying to show them a bit of theory or reading, you know, standard notation or things like that. Because as guitarists, we can use tabs and chord charts and things like that to cut those corners. Me personally, I didn't learn to read actual music till college, when I was like, oh, you have a music degree, you have to read music. Shit. Okay. I guess I'm gonna have to learn how to do that. In your journey getting to where you are now, what was your music education experience like? And there is no wrong answer to that.
To be honest, I have none. Still to this day, I don't have any. I don't know how to read music. I remember, like, you know, getting into some of these more, I guess, complex musical songs in sessions and stuff, where they would be like, okay, hit this chord, and I just didn't know what that chord was. So I had to like buy an app on my phone that was like, okay, he wants to hear like a C minor 6. What is that? And I'll look it up, and I'll just look up, okay, put your finger here. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'll just do it enough to like know it. So at this point, I would say, as far as my chords, I know up to the 9s. Once I get to 11 and 13, I don't really know what those are. So a lot of times, if I hear a chord, I can pick out the most important notes and play that, and they're like, cool, yeah, that works. But I mean, I still to this day don't. There's definitely times where it, you know, can bite me in the ass on certain gigs. I've had certain gigs where they like give me sheet music, and I'm just like, I don't read. And they're like, well, you have to learn it. And I'll have to just memorize really complex things.
Right.
As far as like, I do chord charts. I have an iPad, and that's literally has all my work in it, but they literally just look like, you know, a bunch of bars with chords and notes on top of it that says like, oh, here, play that one line that sounds like that one jingle from this commercial. And like, that's how,
dude, that's how
that's how I memorize. Like, okay, yeah, that's what works there. That's what works there. But if I sent like, people be like, yeah, man, you got a chart for this song. I'm like, I do, but I don't, because it will make zero sense to you. Like, I just have my own way of doing that. But I'm not like a person who's like, oh, you don't need theory to do this. I feel like I've benefited from not going to music school in some ways, and I feel like there's other ways where it would have benefited me greatly. So I think really, you know, it depends on what you do with it. I feel like I know a lot of people who have gone to school for music but haven't done anything with it, and people who haven't and have done a lot. So it's really, it has more to do with your drive than your knowledge. Sure. But I'm never going to discredit, you know, going to school for music and learning the fundamentals of it all. Like, I have every intention to do it at some point. I don't have much reason to, but I think once I have downtime and like I can afford to, you know, spend half of my days studying as opposed to just working and being a family man, then that's when I'll do it. But I'd love to do it at some point. It just hasn't been a necessity so far.
Dude, that is, I mean, I've asked that question in a roundabout way to almost every person I've spoken with. And Nita Strauss had a similar answer to yours, in that, like, I can do what I have to do, but that's what you never had to go past it. And with the school here, we kind of develop programs specific to what people are looking to do. So if they want to go down that direction, I have another guitar teacher here who's a theory wizard, and he'll wrap them in a knot before they know it. Whereas for me, similar to you, it's more real world application. What do you
Yeah.
need to make it work at the gig? And it's more about being, obviously able to fulfill the needs of whatever is asked, but also just being cool, knowing how to hang and just do the
Yeah.
job.
That's so much of having a career in music. Like,
Right.
I don't think, there's places like MI out here, and I think they can prepare you and definitely give you some valuable resources. But the best pairing to a musical education is just real world education. And I don't think enough schools prepare people for what it's like when you're actually working in the industry. The fact that you just said that shows me that you're one of the schools that does do that, but so many don't.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to hear that. And I'm like, your students are lucky to have you, that you pay attention to things like that and not just what's in books.
Thanks, man. Yeah, thank you so much. That, from someone of your accolades, that's a huge compliment. So thank you very much. I feel very strongly about that. We have butted heads with some people along the way because of it, but I'm fully, that's my mission. Sorry, things are popping up on my screen.
All
So
good.
what was the first, because I'm trying to save the big stuff. So how do you differentiate? I was talking to a different session guitar player a couple of weeks back, a Nashville player, and he tours with a big act, but he does all the session work for a completely separate act. When they're choosing a musician for a gig, I guess a lot of people don't recognize sometimes the band you see on stage is not the band you hear on the record.
Yeah.
Who chooses, how does
for live stuff, there's a music director, obviously, you know what that is. Every big artist has a music director. They typically choose who plays with the artist live. The artist obviously has veto power and can pick someone, but for the most part, they don't want to deal with that. So, Beyonce, I think, is the rare case that has a music director who's also her producer on her records. So that's how I'm able to kind of switch between both with her. But every band, or every artist, sorry, let's say any artist, they have a producer who produces their record. The producer of that record is going to choose who plays on that record. The producer will probably have absolutely nothing to do with her live world. And the reason why I think there's a big separation between the two is because producers are producers, music directors are music directors. Producers have their people that they work with, that they work really well with, and there's already chemistry, there's already gel there. So I would try to imagine a producer working on a record is either going to call his main guys or someone that they refer who knows will be a good fit for that situation, because they don't want to spend a day in the studio getting to know each other, because that's just a waste of time. So they want someone who comes in who already is familiar with them, familiar with their workflow, who's able to get in and out and give them what they want, because in the studio, literally time is money. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the big separation between that. With live and touring, the music director wants guys that they know can take direction really well, learn things really fast, retain information really fast. Like, live and studio are two completely different skill sets. In the studio, it's not so important to memorize something or to be super flashy, because that doesn't make it on a record. Parts make it on a record. So like, if you watch any artist, their live arrangements are going to be so different for the most part from their albums. And that's because live, they want this crazy in your face, all the bells and whistles, bands doing crazy runs and solos and stuff that you don't hear on the record. So a lot of times, people who specialize in the live world aren't the same people that specialize in the studio world. So, like, a producer doesn't want to bring someone in a studio to work on a track when he's going to be overplaying or not going to have the greatest tone in the world. That's another thing that, like, live, unless you're a musician, you go see a band, like the general people who are in that audience, they're not musicians. So they're not going to be like, oh, that guitar kind of sounds like crap. It doesn't sound as good as the one on the record. Does it? Like people aren't going to pay attention to that, you know? And I think on a record, people will pay more attention to that because they're fully immersed in just the audio portion of a song because that's all they're listening to. Great. Live, it's a whole different thing. So I think that's the main reason why, is because in a studio on a record, the producer is basically at the helm of everything, and basically the artist gives the approval and stuff like that. So it's all a matter of who they want to work with. You know, like I'm lucky that I do both, but I work with producers who don't work in the live world, and I work with music directors that aren't in that world of studio stuff where they're like producing for huge artists, because you either do one or the other. Most people don't do both.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense. Sorry if I was anything.
No, that made complete sense. Thank you. That was one that was first brought to my attention during one of these interviews. It made sense, but hearing it put like that completely clarifies some of the holes in my understanding of it. So with the Beyonce stuff, how does one get to be the guitar player who they call for Beyonce records? Because that's epic. Grammy award-winning Beyonce records. Congratulations.
Thanks. I mean, it's the one thing that I tell everyone. It's like, it's all about your friendships. You know, I haven't given anyone the story of how I got into that camp. Mostly because I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about because I'm on an NDA.
Gotcha.
But I think I can give like sort of just a very brief, non-detailed way of how that happened. There was a studio that I've been working at for a long time. They needed an engineer. I recommended a good friend of mine, and he became the engineer at that studio. And then he ended up engineering Lemonade. And he ended up leaving the studio, working with them. He does all their, studio stuff. He recorded, the Homecoming performance that was on Netflix. He's basically their on-call 24-hour engineer. When her last tour finished, there was a show coming up that was initially supposed to just be a pre-record. They needed an acoustic player. He recommended me because I think the person that he was wanting to get on it was out of town. And so he's like, hey, who should I get on acoustic? And so my friend, who's the engineer, who's been with them forever, he's just like, I got a guy you should call. So they called me for it. And I think I was like recommended as a like classically trained acoustic player, which, just judging by our conversation a few minutes ago, I'm not. So it was the kind of thing like where I was very stressed out in that moment because I didn't want to look dumb. I didn't want to make a fool of myself, but I just did my thing and I powered through it and they were happy with it. And then they ended up changing their mind and doing the show live instead of in the studio. So I, rehearsed for a couple of weeks. We did the show and they were really happy with it. And, like I said, this is a rare case where her musical director is also her producer. It's a guy named Derek Dixie. He's been with her for 9 years, and the guy is one of the most musical genius people I've ever met in my life. And I love the man. And, we just got along really well. We were friends, like immediately, like day one of being in the studio, we were cracking jokes and having fun, and the environment was just super fun. And when we finished that show, he was just like, yo, man, I love your playing. You're fun to hang out with. We'll keep calling you. And then, he called me to work on some of his personal stuff shortly after that. And I was like, I'm so down. And we just established a great rapport. And then when the next record came about, he called me and he's like, hey, would you be interested in working on this? And I didn't even know what it was for because they're very secretive. But I came in and tracked on some songs. And then, shortly after that, the record was out and I was on it. And now I've been kind of like his go-to guitarist for the past 3 years. And it's all just because I recommended a friend for something. He recommended me for that same thing that he ended up getting involved in. And I became friends with the people there and we all got along and we all did our job. And that's it. There's no secret to success in the music industry. It's just do what you do well. And be nice to everyone and don't be fake. Don't be opportunistic. Don't see opportunities in people. Just make relationships and friendships and help people out. And those people will help you out. And it's just, that's been my way of doing things. And, I feel like I maybe got a late start in my career because I wasn't this crazy go-getter. Like, I'm not going to just be like, hey, everyone, look at me. Like, I'm amazing. Get me on this gig. But all the relationships that I've built and all the success that I've had has been very organic. And because of that, it's very fulfilling to me. Like, I feel like I've earned what I have and worked for what I have. And, I'm happy with it.
Dude, I think you should be super happy with it. And I think that, that's so gratifying and validating to hear, because one of the, Beyonce, TLC, Bebe Rexha, like it just goes on, that these big players, one of the things that we try and teach, pre-COVID, again, we would have band programs. We would put young musicians together in groups and kind of help them with interband dynamics and booking gigs and things like that. And as I mentioned earlier, the number one thing we try and say is, no one's here to have a bad time. So don't be an asshole. Like, just be cool. And if you're not inherently cool inside, it's going to come out and people are going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's proof in the pudding.
I mean, it's so true, man. And like, I'm lucky that I'm at a point now where even in COVID, like my workflow has been consistent and steady and I'm able to provide for my family. But man, like, no one gets into music to not have a good time.
Exactly.
So if you're in situations where you're not having a good time, it better be a lot of money, because it's just it's not worth it. Like we do this because we love it. It's not like we're working some office job or we're some CEO of some company that we know a lot of stress comes, but the payoff is worth it. It's like, I'm such a big like supporter of, hey, only do things that are fun and like make you happy, because that shows in your music. And the people who stick with these gigs that are not fun, they just become bitter and they become people who are difficult to work with. And it's just not worth doing it. Like I'm at a point now where if I get called for a gig and I'm like, that doesn't sound like fun, like I'm just like, I'm good. Like I don't want to not have a good time. Life is stressful enough. Why should you associate your passion with your stress?
I love that. That's our soundbite right there. Why should you associate your passion with your stress? Beautiful. Wow. How has COVID affected session work? Like, was there a period of time? Like, well, first of all, I usually ask the question, what do people think about tube amps versus amp modeling technology? So maybe we can fold that into this question, but how has, are you tracking sessions at your studio and flying them to the producer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do a lot. Actually now I think people are more comfortable with in-person sessions. I'm doing much more in-person stuff than remote. But, when COVID first hit here in LA and everything locked down in March, just like pretty much everywhere else, it was dead. I think I was the first time that I went maybe 3-4 weeks with like nothing. And it was scary. And that's, shortly after that, we found out we were expecting a baby. So it was like a stressful time.
Oh my gosh.
And, but before the pandemic, I had really been putting a lot of energy into recording myself. I do go direct, but I use tube amps. So I see it behind you right there, the UA aux box. I love that thing. Love that thing. That thing has absolutely changed my life for remote recording. So, since most of my stuff is electric, that's what I use to record. I'm literally like, my laptop right now is on my coffee table in front of my couch. And this is where I do 90% of my remote work. Awesome. If I'm doing acoustic stuff, I have like a rehearsal lockout that I share with a drummer friend of mine. And we built an ISO booth in there. So if I have to track acoustic, I have an ISO booth where I can get quiet recordings and clean recordings. As far as digital stuff, I do have a Kemper. I was using that on tour with Bebe Rexha. We were doing the Jonas Brothers Happiness Begins tour in 2019. I used the Kemper on that. Sounds great. My buddy Michael Britt makes some of the best profiles that I've ever heard. And I know the guys at Kemper really well. They're awesome. It's a great tool. It's a great alternative for not using a real amp. But now even with BB, right now we're doing a lot of like not live stream, but just like pre-recordings for things to be streamed. I'm using the UA with it. I bring a combo. I bring my UA. They don't want stage volume, so I'm on ears, and it sounds great. So that's like, if I can't use an amp on stage, I'm using the UA because it just sounds incredible to me.
Yeah, I got this maybe 2 months ago, and so at the school, we have a case out in the front with all my guitar pedals, and I let the students take them out and borrow them like library books.
That's awesome.
It's really awesome.
Do you have like pedal cards instead of library cards?
You know what? I joked about that before. It's actually still because we're in New York, so we got creamed just like California did in the
Oh
beginning.
yeah, you guys got hit hard first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second COVID death in the state of New York occurred in the town where the school is before New York
Wow.
City got crazy. So there's still some students have pedals from a year ago. But anyway, we're always this hot debate between the digital and the not digital. I love my amps. I have an Axe FX here. I had a Kemper at home for a while, but I sold it. But this UA thing changed everything because now I can use my amps and get everything I want. And it's just a brilliant piece of technology.
I love it, man. I use it every day. Like it's completely changed my life. And like I was just going spiff into my Apollo. And then I went into a studio recently with a good friend of mine named Mike Bennett. He's an incredible drummer. He was been Richie Kotzen's drummer for like ever.
Oh, wow.
And he was having me go through some outboard gear. And I'm like, man, like, why does it sound so much better in your studio than it does in my home going through nothing? And he's like, you need to run it through some mic pre's and this and that. So I'm using the UA 1073 mic pre now. Dude, I've never been happier with tone that I'm recording with at home. Like it's, and it's making it on like, big stuff, like a lot of TV stuff and TV shows and film scores, like all that's being done at home on my rig. So I'm stoked.
Incredible. That's incredible. How do you transition into outside of, the artist world into, the TV and that kind of those gigs? Is that just, again, who you know?
Yeah, totally. Like the first producer I started working with where I was doing a lot of TV work and stuff is a guy named Jack Rayner. And he was the music supervisor. It still is for like X Factor, America's Got Talent. And so a lot of these producers who are working on music for TV shows or artists or stuff, they're the ones that are calling me for it. So I have like a handful of producers that I work with regularly. And they're the ones that like, okay, I'll just get a call. I won't even know what I'm working on. I'll walk into the studio. I'll be like, I'll set up. I'm like, cool. What are we working on today? They're like, oh, we're working on this spot. We're working on this film. We're working on that. So I have a very small circle of people that I work with very consistently. So I just have great relationships with them. I know what they want. They know how I work. I know how they work.
That's incredible.
I'm tracking stuff remotely for them. And technology now has gotten so much better. Like I do a lot of remote sessions on Zoom and I use something called Loopback. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
But so I have my DAW feeding into Zoom with this as a talkback, and they're hearing me tracking and it's all connected. So they're hearing my DAW feed into their Zoom feed along with what I'm playing with like the click tracks. So they're literally hearing everything I'm hearing as I'm tracking, and they're able to kind of be like, okay, yeah, I like that. I don't like that. So it's so close to being in the same room with someone. It just made things a lot easier. I'm totally getting off topic, but yeah, a lot of
I love it.
Yeah, a lot. Definitely, just the producers that I work with are the ones that get me on there. Like when people tell me, like, how'd you get into this? How'd you get into that? I'm like, I got a phone call, and this is what I worked on. It's like, so I've gotten to a point now where all my work comes to me, and then I'm really lucky that these cool opportunities pop up.
But dude, see, I think that's so inspiring to young musicians starting out. Another thing that we try and put out there to the young musicians that we get to work with is just because you pick up your guitar, and I wish the best of everyone, I don't mean this as a negative, but you might not become the next Eddie Van Halen or John Mayer, but that doesn't mean for a second that you can't make a good living playing music. And It's just being open to all these things. Maybe it's session work on the side, and then you're going to back up an artist at some cafe on your acoustic guitar. Whatever it is, like, music can become this all-encompassing thing. Just get all your pots on the stove, and whichever one boils, that's the one you got to grab at. But just to hear, you're in a place where huge artists and huge gigs, you're the one they call. Like that to me is a dream situation. So really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, the one advice I'd love to give, your students, which I'm sure you have touched something on this at some point as well, is, man, do not let social media dictate your success, and don't let it drive you. Like like a lot of younger up and coming aspiring session musicians will hit me up on Instagram and they're like, yo, man, how are you getting all these gigs? You don't even have like a crazy following. And I'm like, break down the fundamental aspect of what you just asked me. Like, you're asking me how I'm getting gigs without having followers. Like, what do those two have to do with each other? Like, nothing whatsoever. There were gigs before social media. There were all this stuff was happening before. Like if it ties in with the law of attraction, and it ties in with what you work. Whatever you put your energy into, that will grow.
Yep.
If you put all of your energy into building a following online, you're going to build a following online, but that's not going to get you work, because that's not what you're putting your energy into, So it sounds like super hippy dippy, but it's true, and I've never put much energy into that, like it's grown very slowly and steadily, but I'm not putting content out every day because that's not what I want to do. Like I don't want to be an Instagram guitarist. And if that's what someone aspires to, then great. And you'll meet that aspiration, hopefully. But my priority is to work and make a living and provide for my family. And that's what I do.
I love everything you just said. I love that you said hippy dippy, because when I go on off tangents like that, that's exactly what I said, that exact phrase. You're totally right, dude. Like Instagram followers that doesn't pay the bills. And that's the reality of it. Being famous doesn't come with a paycheck. Working comes with a paycheck, and a paycheck allots you the things you want in life. I have a video coming out about it on Friday. I run across all the time students being very intimidated by what they see some of these Instagram guitarists doing. And I try and tell them, that person who's doing that thing that seems so incredibly impossible, A, what's the market for that? Imagine hearing that in a song. You're not gonna. B, maybe they're born with some talent that you and I don't have, you and him doesn't have, whatever. C, maybe they're not even really playing what you think they're playing. Maybe they're miming to a pre-recorded thing that took them 10,000 hours to tape. Like, you just don't know. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And I always say and that's the theme of this thing that I got putting out, is you have to choose to be inspired, not intimidated. Don't let it break off.
Like I'm so, like I find so much of what people do online so impressive. And I'm like, man, that's unbelievable that you are able to do the things you do. And, like I'll even joke, I'll be like, yo, man, you make me want to put down my guitar. Like there's no way I would ever be able to do that. But I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay with I'm find it inspiring that I'm constantly around musicians who run circles around me, But the one thing that I encourage everyone to do is find what makes you unique. Everyone has something unique to offer with their instruments, with their playing, with everything, and find a way to be a chameleon with that, to be able to take what you can do and what you do well and apply that to anything that you work on, anything you're a part of, and do it in a way to enhance the music, not to show off, but just to add value. I'm I've done this recently as well. Well, I'll get asked to work on tracks that I'm like, man, this song's amazing. I'd love to work on it. And I'm listening to it and I'm just like, it doesn't need me. Like there's nothing that I can add to this that I feel is enhancing the song or adding to it. I'm like, if I add something, it's just adding the sound of a guitar. It's not helping the song in any way. In fact, sometimes it can be taking away. And I think it's so important to be able to do that, and I've done that very recently. I'm just like, hey man, I tried. There's nothing I feel that I can add to this song. I love it so much. It doesn't need me. Yeah. And so that's what I think is so important as a musician to do in this world, is to be selfless and to know when, like, to not just think about yourself, to really live in servitude to the music. And having that mentality will really get people who value that calling you for work.
Amen to that, brother. I couldn't have manufactured it in my mind any better. That's the name of the game.
Thanks, man.
All right, let's do some gear stuff. So when you get called to a Bebe Rexha gig or session, what do you bring with you? Like,
I bring the same thing everywhere. I have a pedal board. One of my best friends, his name's Johnny Gomez. He just started his own company called Cute Rigs. and you can find him on Instagram. And he built me like a custom pedal board, and it's freaking beautiful. And I basically just had him build me a board with every pedal that I absolutely need for any situation. So that's my board. I don't have multiple boards. I don't have a B board. I bring that everywhere. I use Bogner amps. I'm really lucky that they made me my own kind of one-off signature amp a while back. That's just my sound and my tone and works well with everything I use. And I mean, it's funny, like I go into sessions and I kind of just use the same sound and the same drive pedals on everything that I work on. I just let my fingers sort of dictate how it sounds. Like so much of your tone is in your fingers.
Yeah.
So I actually do very little tweaking and dialing and adjusting. But I also think that at this point, people are calling me for my sound. So I just bring the same thing everywhere, and I have everything that I would need on my board. And I carry like a little mono tick bag with like extra pedals in case I want something that's not on my board. But yeah, it looks complex, but it's not. It's pretty simple, but it's very versatile. So I'm able to kind of just with my board, and I'll usually bring one of my Novos, or I'll bring a PRS, usually like a humbucker guitar with a single coil splits on it as well if I want to get thinner sounds. And I kind of have like my Swiss Army sound with that.
Cool. Yeah, I saw in the picture we used for this that what's that, 594, right?
The white one?
Yeah.
That's a DGT, the David Grissom one.
Oh, even sexier.
But yeah, so funny that I don't even own that guitar. Wynn let me borrow it for some flyouts, and then I got asked to do some promos for Bogner while I had that guitar, and they had their photographer there, and he just took a picture of me with it. And I was like, man, I love this picture. I'm going to use it for everything, even though this isn't my guitar. And yeah, so I returned that one back. But right now I have a custom 22 from them and a Silver Sky. They're great. I love them.
I love the Silver Sky. I think they did something really special. You think, how do you make a Strat better than a Strat? It's something different, but it's fantastic.
I'm not a Strat guy. I'm not a single coil guy. I definitely need to have one. Like, I've been doing a lot of stuff with Bootsy Collins, and a lot of times he's like, give me that Nile Rodgers vibe. And I'm like, I can try to split my coils and get close to that, but it's not the same thing as like that second position on a Strat, Right. So I was talking to Wynn. Do you know Wynn Krozak?
You know Wynn. I have a Wynn story to tell you in a second. Yeah.
So Wynn's a really good friend of mine. His office is literally 5 minutes from my house. So I go there all the time.
PRS West Coast thing that I see the pictures of on his Instagram. Yeah.
Wow. So that's actually at a rehearsal studio called Center Staging. And that's where I do all the rehearsals with Bebe. So like I'm literally, every time I'm in rehearsals with Bebe, we're always hanging out at Wynn spot in our breaks and stuff.
That's awesome. Dude, I met Wynn at NAMM in 2006, I think it was. And that's kind of when we started the relationship. And now I deal with Bev mostly now. But Wynn was talking to me on the phone thereafter, and we're trying to figure out what would be the best guitar for me, because I was coming from mostly playing Les Pauls, but I explained they were heavy. So he hooked me up with a custom 22. And when I was first starting to play guitar, when I was like 13 years old, I saw at a Guitar Center a PRS that was way up high. You know how they put the really fancy ones where you can't touch them? Mm-hmm. It was this red color that faded to black, and they called it Scarlet Sunburst. And you couldn't find them anymore. I guess they had stopped making the color. So when I'm talking to Wynn, he's like, oh, I have something that I think will be perfect for you. It's in the artist stock, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of a weird color, but I think you'll like it. And I was like, well, don't tell me. I'll be surprised. Anything I'm grateful for. Thank you so much. It shows up. I have it hanging over here. It's the Scarlet Sunburst. It's that exact guitar color that I'd fallen in love with. So for the rest of my life, I will be forever grateful to Wynn, because somehow he like telepathically knew exactly what I wanted and like picked something from my childhood memory. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool. All right, let's not go there yet. Let's stay on the topics now. So with the Bebe Rexha stuff, the songs are written before you get on them. Is that how that works?
So I don't work in the studio with Bebe. I just play with her live.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just a live situation. It's so weird. So the one thing I always say is I don't consider myself anyone's guitarist, because I don't feel like any gig is mine. It's not a matter of like, oh, you don't own me. It's more like I don't own the gig. With Bebe, I had filled in on some rehearsals, and then the tour came up with the Jonas Brothers, and it ended up getting extended. It was like a 4-month tour. It was super long. her guitarist that I was filling in for in the rehearsals didn't want to be gone for that long, and I didn't want to be gone for that long, so we split it in half. So I did half the tour, he did half the tour, and then he had like an emergency and I had to fill in on like the last 2 days. I got a call Friday and they're like, hey, we need you to play the Forum Saturday and Sunday. And I was like, okay. That's like, a bucket list gig for me to play there in LA. So I showed up and did it, and then the tour finished, and I wasn't really doing anything with her for a while because she wasn't doing anything. And then once the pandemic hit, her guitarist that had been her guitarist for like a long time lives on the East Coast. So I was getting called for stuff here in LA because I'm here in LA, And I think recently she had a bit of a change with music directors and bands. So I feel like I don't know if anything's ever clarified if I'm someone's guitarist. If I hear an artist be like, oh, this is my guitarist, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm her guitarist. But I always look at it like I'm playing for you today, or like I always like the wording I use is so specific. Like I've recently been working with this person. Like with Beyonce, I'm not her touring guitarist. She typically tours with a female band. I would consider myself more of her studio guitarist, but I will get called for certain live events that are like a certain nature. Like, she'll do shows with like that are very stripped down acoustic string section choir. So shows like that I'll get called for. But like I don't know, it always feels weird for me to say like I'm this person's guitarist, But yeah, sorry to stray from your question. With Bebe, I just play with her live.
Got it. When you're doing a gig like that with her live, or even in the Beyonce live acoustic setting, is the music very strict as to what you have to do? Is there any room for improvisation, be it in the lead, or is it the same time every night, same way every night?
With Bebe, there was a lot of we can have a lot of fun with that one. She wanted that. She wants her shows to always feel like a rock show. So I'll always add like just kind of gratuitous, unnecessary licks and fills and stuff. And and she'll just be like, oh, that's great. Yeah, do that. Because she wants that live rock energy. Like she says it all the time. She's like, I'm a rock star. I'm not a pop star. And I was like, okay, cool. So that vibe with her is a lot of fun. With Beyonce live, I don't think it's super strict. The bass player that plays with us is a guy named Courtney Leonard. He's phenomenal. He'll always do these crazy runs that I'm just like, oh, dude, it's ridiculous. He's one of the best bass players I've ever heard in my life. But I think when I'm playing with her, the parts that I'm playing are so subtle and gentle that it's not necessary to do anything other than what's there. Like I feel like if I did it, it would distract from the song, and it's just not needed or even necessary. So I follow my intuition. Like I really treat live settings like a record. Like I feel like I never just play stuff just to play stuff. Everything has intention, and everything's like, I have that mentality of like, oh, does this song need this? And if it doesn't, then I just won't do it. And I feel like a lot of MDs appreciate that. And it also, to me, it's like whenever I do something flashy, it means more because I'm not doing it all over the place. So you'll pay more attention to the very few select parts where I do something really cool, as opposed to like if I were just doing it like all the time, it would get really old and really boring.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna ask one more question before our rapid fire section of the program. There's a question here from the chat, actually from Sam. Sam is asking you this question. Hello, Samantha.
What up, Sam?
What was your worst experience playing? Did something ever go epically wrong?
Worst experience playing. I don't think anything's gone horribly wrong. I'm kind of like a Boy Scout when it comes to live shows. Like here's my anxiety kicking in, but I'm always like, what is the worst thing that could possibly happen? And how do I do everything in my power to avoid it? Always come prepared, always have everything. But definitely something that was out of my control. Jumping in on the Bebe tour in 2019, the way that tour worked was I did the rehearsals with Everett, the guitar player. We were both playing the rehearsals together. So we'd kind of either play at the same time or we do one run of the set with him and one run of the set with me, just so that we both felt comfortable with it. And then shortly after that rehearsal, the tour started. So I think 2 months into the tour, I jumped in. And so I jumped in, not really playing with them or having that chemistry. And I flew in day of the show, no rehearsal, no sound check, and just jumped on stage in front of 20,000 people.
Wow.
Normally that alone would be a little stressful, but somehow on the way there flying, like when you get in the plane and your ears kind of get the cabin pressure thing, and then, one ear will pop and one ear won't. So when I got off the plane, one of my ears didn't pop. And I was like, this is weird. This never happens. And I kept trying to get my ear to pop. And I was almost completely deaf out of one of my ears. And it didn't come back for a long time. So I had to go on stage with my in-ears completely deaf out of one ear. Gotcha. And that was probably my least favorite experience live. And then I think after about a week of that, it still didn't come back. So I ended up we were in Detroit a week later, and Detroit's not the greatest city in the world. So the tour manager's like, hey man, don't go around town if you don't have to, And I was like, no, I need to go to a doctor. So I went to an urgent care, and I was like, hey, so I haven't been able to hear out of my ear for a week, and I'm on tour, and I need something now because I'm going to another city tomorrow, and I'm not sleeping well because I'm in a bus and I can't hear out of an ear. And they're like, you have a really bad ear infection and there's fluid buildup behind your eardrum. Wow. And I was like, I've never had that before. What do I do? And they gave me some medicine they gave me antibiotics and some steroid shots, or steroid, just steroid pills. And so I took them, and it was feeling better. And I don't know why, I just didn't finish taking the antibiotics. And so it came back.
Oh, no.
I literally spent this whole tour practically being sick. And right before we went to Rock in Rio, I went to another hospital in Kansas City, and they're like, okay, here's the medicine. Do not stop taking it. And don't drink while you're in Brazil. And I'm like, man, you're really just making this tour as least fun for me as possible. So eventually it went away, but that was my worst experience tour. Just literally jumping onto a tour, no rehearsal, no sound check. I just had to go on stage, hopefully remember everything because I didn't spend a whole lot of time prepping for it. And with one ear, just play a show.
Dude, I've asked that question to many of people, and I've heard things from, the tubes blow, fuse, strings. You take the cake by saying, my ear stopped working.
And it's man,
you're done.
I never get sick or anything like that. And everyone on the tour that year is what's with you, man? You've been sick this whole tour. I'm I never get sick. I just have the worst luck on this tour for some reason. But I've been fine, and I've never had an ear infection since. So
good. I'm happy. We can laugh because it turned out okay. But that's scary. I mean, as a musician, your ears, that's pretty big. So
what would you do if you went deaf?
I every so often, my brain wanders and I go to a weird place and things like that. I'm like, what if someone jumps me and breaks all my fingers? What if I go and I'm like, I don't know. No, it's just happiness.
Yeah. Let's not go there.
Right.
There's enough.
All right.
There's enough stress in the world.
Right. Exactly. All right, Rod Castro, here we go. Our series of rapid fire questions. I will ask you two different things, a simple this or that. See my game show host voice. All you have to do is say one or the other. You don't have to justify your answer. All music related, nothing heavy or political or weird. All righty?
All right.
Here we go. Humbucker or single coil?
Humbucker all day.
All righty. I have to preface this by saying style. So Les Paul style guitar or Strat style guitar?
Les Paul.
If you were to pick a Fender type guitar, would it be a Strat or Telly?
Telly.
Les Paul or SG?
Les Paul.
If you were to play bass, P bass or jazz bass?
Jazz bass.
Oh, you're doing fast. I like this. Acoustic, Martin or Taylor?
I pick Martin over Taylor.
Okay, I agree. This one's kind of a silly question because they're so different, but for amplification, a Marshall or a Fender?
Marshall. Actually, no, Fender.
Okay.
Because I'm thinking of amp gain. So I'm if it was going amp gain, Marshall. If I'm using my pedals, Fender.
Right. That's why they're kind of hard to, but that's the way I thought of it when I was constructing the question, as a pedal platform versus just straight tube overdrive. All right. Some effect pedal related questions. Delay or overdrive?
If I have to pick between the two?
I'm terrible. I know.
Overdrive.
Okay. Oh no, I blew it. I got that wrong. That was supposed to be delay or reverb. That makes more sense.
Oh, reverb. It's definitely more applicable.
I merged two questions together. Sorry. So now the overdrive question: fuzz or overdrives? Like a fuzz.
Overdrive.
Okay. Cool.
I'm not a fuzz guy.
Yeah, dude, it's a hard thing to wrangle. It is. I got that. This one here. Oh no, I'm caught. This.
Oh, who makes that?
This ZVEX did a collaboration with Chase Bliss Audio for that new
nice.
movie, and it's called the Bliss Factory. So it's like a whole bunch of knobs and buttons. I can't figure it out.
I have a bunch of fuzz pedals, and a lot of them sound the same to me, and I like them. I don't use them enough to keep it on my board, but that's one of the pedals that I always keep on me. I have the Bogner Oxford that was made with Rupert Neve, and I love that one.
Okay, yeah, that one wins. All right, phaser or chorus?
I'm really not a chorus guy, so I'd have to say phaser.
That's the right answer. That's the one that I stand for. Phaser wins that one.
I thought you said there was no wrong answer.
That's the one I know. Gotta make it a little crazy.
Unless I'm doing like Andy Summers or Prince, I will never use a chorus.
And that is the one reason why it would be okay. Or if I'm doing like Zakk Wylde era Ozzy and I need big, crazy squealies, and then the chorus stays on the whole time. Beatles or Stones?
Beatles all day.
Cool. All right, here's a heavy one. John or Paul?
Ooh. I think I would go John if I had to pick, but that's a tough one.
It is tough, I know. Zeppelin or Floyd?
Floyd.
Okay, then we're gonna go heavy again. Dark Side or The Wall?
The Wall.
Okay, I agree. I'm a Wall guy too. Most people say Dark Side. I think The Wall.
I love them both, but if I had to think of like, okay, what are all the songs that I could not live without on The Wall, and then compare that to Dark Side, I'd probably have more on The Wall.
I totally agree. When I say The Wall, people are like, "Oh, you don't like Dark Side?" I'm like, no. When the chorus comes in and us and them, I weep openly. Don't misunderstand me. But The Wall has something different for me. All right, and then
although if you ask me what my favorite record is from them, it's Animals.
That's a great answer, dude. I do another live stream at 9:00 Eastern time on YouTube with a friend of mine in Chicago and a friend in Arizona called Record Talk. And we just talk about records, just nerd out over music. And our episode about Animals was one of our, most viewed episodes because so many people like that's a sleeper one. Everyone secretly likes Animals and they don't.
Well, the great thing about that record is you cannot skip songs on it.
Right.
Like it's just, the music doesn't allow you to do that. If you do that, you feel like you're walking in the middle of a conversation and you can't join it. It's like it has to be played front to back.
Yep. Totally agree. Okay. My very last question, since we're both from the 80s, but 90s music people, Pearl Jam or Nirvana?
Pearl Jam.
Oh yeah. Sorry. We're friends. We're good.
See, okay. I got to say, I was never a big Nirvana fan in the time of Nirvana. And I didn't really start appreciating their musicality until maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Dude, I go. No,
I was gonna say, I think I'm the kind of person that if there's too much hype about something, I'm like, I feel like I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm not going to enjoy it because everyone around me is enjoying it for me and like pushing it on me kind of thing. So I think now I can go back and listen to their records and really like appreciate it. But at the time, not the biggest fan. And I feel like Pearl Jam had just way more of an impact on me musically than Nirvana did. I think Nirvana was too angry for me at the time that they came out, and Pearl Jam was more introspective and like deep,
Dude, Pearl Jam's my favorite band. I've seen them. I've like literally rerouted family vacations to catch a Pearl Jam show. So.
I actually never saw Pearl Jam live until maybe 6 years ago.
Life-changing, right?
It was great. It was so good. They ended with Baba O'Reilly, and it was incredible.
So cool. So cool.
Also, Sam just asked it coffee or tea. Coffee. I'm an oat milk latte guy.
Nice. I only because we're vegan, so I only recently got into the oat milk. And some places have like really crappy oat milk. There's a like little bespoke coffee shop here in town, and they make their own oat milk, and it's ridiculously awesome.
See, I have an espresso machine, and I buy the oat milk that my favorite cafe was using, so I just literally make it at home every day.
Well, that is brilliant. That is probably the smarter way to handle it versus me walking up the street for a $7 coffee, but sometimes we do things. Dude, this has been awesome. So cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, man.
And your stories and just all of it, I look forward to hearing more cool stuff on Clubhouse and just staying in touch, man. But thank you so much. Stay safe out there.
For sure. Can I tell you one more story? And I just love telling this story.
Dude, I'll talk. I have nowhere to go till 8:00. Okay. I'll talk as long as you like.
And so the only reason why I want to tell this is because I want to encourage people to do what I did. Yes, I do love matcha tea, but I like the powdered matcha tea, like when it feels like creamy and foamy.
Yes.
Okay, so I was on tour doing the BB tour with the Jonas Brothers. We took a break from that tour to go play Rock in Rio in Brazil. I will preface this story with saying that one of my biggest influences in guitar playing has been funk, James Brown, P-Funk, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We were at the gate. I don't know if I told you the story on Clubhouse before, so I'm sorry if you have to hear it again. But,
I would love to. Even if I've heard it before, I will listen.
But so we're at the gate, and the drummer, a guy named Trey, says, "Oh, look, Bootsy Collins is walking by." And I thought he was joking. And I turn around and Bootsy Collins is walking by us. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, it was one of those few moments where I was like starstruck, and he walks into the same gate we're at. So he's on the same flight as us.
Wow.
And so he checks in and everything. And I just see him, and he's like, he's with his wife and his manager. And I'm just like, I got to go say something to him. So I walk up to him, and I'd worked on a track at a studio like maybe 10, 12 years ago that he played bass on. And I'm sure he has no recollection of doing that. Doesn't remember the song, doesn't remember anything, but I used that as sort of like an icebreaker to talk to him. And I was like, hey, Bootsy, I just want to say I'm a huge fan of yours. I worked on a track that, you worked on like 10 years ago at Skip Saylor Studios. It was one of my first sessions. And it to me, it was like the coolest thing ever to be playing along to your parts on a track, And he was the nicest, coolest dude ever. He was just like, oh man, that's so awesome. He shakes my hand. He asks me what I do, who I play with. And I told him. And so we chatted for a bit. It was really nice. We get on the plane. We get off the plane, and I asked him if I can take a picture with him. So he's more than happy to. We chat for a bit more, and he's like, where are you playing? And I'm like, oh, I'm playing Rock in Rio. And he's like, oh, me too. We were playing the same night on 2 different stages. And he pulls me aside, and he's like, yo, man, do you play lead guitar? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I have a track that I need lead guitar on, and Buckethead's playing on it. And he's doing the rhythm on it, but he didn't play lead on it. And I need lead on it, and I need to send it for mixing in the next 2 days. He's like, do you have a way to record while we're here in Brazil? And I was like, yeah. So I get to my hotel, and I have an email from him with the track on it. And this was I think beginning of October, and the song was coming out for Halloween, and it was a Bootsy and Buckethead version of Monster Mash. And the song's out. You can listen to it. And, he sends me an email, and he's like, yo, all right, give me a pass. That sounds like Jimmy. Give me a pass. That sounds like a rock solo. Give me a pass. That sounds like crazy metal. And give me one pass that's just you, your thing on it. And I was like, cool. So I'm listening to it, and I'm like, this is crazy. I'm literally met him on a plane. I'm in my hotel room tracking on a song for him 2 hours later. And man, I was losing my mind trying to channel Jimmy on one thing, channel this on one thing. And I'm like, is he going to like this? Is he going to like this? And I spent an hour just deleting takes after takes after takes, because I was like, this isn't good enough. This isn't what he wants. So eventually I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to do what I think sounds right. I'll send that to him, and I'll be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking works. Let me know if this is the vibe you're looking for, just so he can give me some kind of direction, So I track on it. I send it to him, and he's like, yo, man, you killed it. That's going on the record. And so the first thing I sent him, he loved it. And I was like, holy crap, And he's like, send me the wave files, here's my manager, you guys can do, work out payment arrangements and everything. This is going on the record. I love your style. I love talking to you. I want to keep working with you in the future. I got something coming up that I'd love for you to be a part of. And I was just like, are you kidding me? I remember being young and listening to these James Brown records and P-Funk records that he produced. And I'm like, to me, that's what made me not want to focus on lead guitar, because these rhythm parts, the fact that these people can play the same thing over and over and it never sounds boring and it always has this intensity and pocket to it. That's what I geared towards as a musician, you know? And sure enough, I did that track. And like a couple months later, he's like, yo, I'm producing this song. I want you to play guitar on it. Cool. A couple months later, it's like, yo, I'm making a record. I want you to write some songs for me. So I co-wrote some songs on his last record. He featured me as an artist on them, even though I just played solos on them. So if you look at this record called The Power of the One, track 3 is called Slide Easy, and one of the last ones is called Stolen Dreams. Like, my name is featured on the track just because I played some solos on it and wrote them with him. And it was like, had I not gotten, like, okay, another crazy thing about this story. On our flight was Seal and the guys from Foo Fighters. And we were all playing at Rock in Rio the same, like 2 days from each other. And, you know, he pulled me aside at one point. It was either him or his manager. He's like, you know, man, you saw who else was on that plane, right? And I'm like, yeah, of course. It was a crazy flight. And he's like, we ended up, you know, meeting up with the Foo Fighter guys and Seal afterwards. And like, all of them were just like, yo, man, we saw you on the plane and we like wanted to say something, but we were just starstruck, man. We couldn't work up the nerve to come and talk to you. Like, Bootsy is a freaking legend for anyone who doesn't know who he is, you know? And he's like, you're the only one who came up to me and just said, what's up? And started chatting with me. And I just like your vibe, man. And so like, you know, that's why I want to keep working with you. And it was like, I had no expectation of anything coming up to him and talking to him. I just wanted to be like, I am such a fan. You have like impacted my life and my career more than you know. And I just want to say thank you. And that turned into like me now being the dude he calls for everything guitar-wise.
Dude, I have chills. That's insane.
Wow. It was like one of those, I remember calling my fiance and I'm just like, how did this just happen? You know, and she's like, he probably senses people's energies and he knows that you're just a good dude and that you liked your vibe and he wanted to work with you. And like, he's on Clubhouse now. And I jumped in on a room that he was in and I told that story and he like messaged me right after. He's like, yo, man, you really got me with that story. I never knew that that's where you were coming from when you just came up and said hi. And I was just like, I meant every word of it, man. And it's just like, that's like, to me, the kind of stuff that happens in movies, you know, like that's not real life. And it was all just because I just wanted to say hi and show my appreciation and show my respect. And I had no intentions other than just to show him how much I appreciated him, you know? And like so many gigs and everything that I get, I feel like I retain these relationships just because I come from a very genuine place where I'm just legitimately happy to be where I am and do what I'm doing, which ties in with don't do gigs that suck because they're going to make you a jerk. So we circled back to that. Like, don't do anything that isn't fun because music should only be fun.
But dude, I mean, how many times have all of us been in a position where we, you know, wuss out because we're just, oh, I don't want to, you know, just put myself in an uncomfortable position because it was uncomfortable to approach him. It could have gone a million different ways, but your genuineness and your sincerity, it got you the gig in essence. And that's a beautiful story. You know, that's
crazy. It doesn't even seem real every time I say it, you know?
Wow. And he's an intimidating guy. I met him at NAMM. Him and Buckethead were walking around one year and I'm like, and I'm 6'1", and I'm like, tall dude. You know? Wow.
But if you ever like, you know, just rap with him for a bit, he is the kindest, warmest human being ever. And it's like crazy that, you know, I'm where I am now with him just because of that situation, you know?
I can't wait to check out the song. I'm excited now. Dude, no, thank you so much for giving that little extra story in there. That was, see, that's why I love doing this stuff, man, honestly, because there's so many people out there who are doing the things that anyone who picks up a guitar or sings in a microphone could only dream of. And to hear people like yourself, to make yourself available and tell stories like that, I think to the up and coming generations, that shows them, you know, it's setting a path that can be followed if you do it the right way, and shows that, you know, it can work. And just be cool. Just be a good person. Just be cool.
But be naturally cool. Don't try too hard.
Don't fake it. No, that's I think faking being cool is even worse than not actually being cool.
It's because dude, like your intuition, everything can sense all of that, man.
Right. It's like the opposite of cocky, but equally as bad.
Yeah.
Cool, dude. Wow. Well, I don't know what else to say anymore.
Thanks so much for having me, Rob.
Dude, I seriously, like, on my arm, you can't see it. Chills, totally. So thank you so much for sharing that. Stay safe. I hope one day when the world is safe, I'll be out on your side of the world and maybe we'll meet up and grab a drink.
Definitely, man. I'm sure I'll be in New York at some point. We'll have to take some time out and get a coffee or something.
I would love that, dude. Awesome.
We'll get a
Thank
matcha.
you. Yes, matcha. Yeah. Frothy kind of
for Sam.
Yeah. All right,
All right,
stay
man.
safe. I'll see you
Take
soon.
care, bro.
Later.